right, everyone. Let's get going here. Welcome to our data-driven community. If you're new to these events, we host a data-driven event once a month, middle of the month at noon Central Time. So we'll have one more session in December. We'll finish out the year, and we'll start doing obviously more sessions into next year. Here's the meetup link. Just encourage you to share this with other colleagues or other people that you know that are interested in Tableau, interested in data. Would love to build this community as we go forward. Awesome. Let me go to the next slide here. So here's a quick agenda for today. I'll do, as always, a meeting format and an update of upcoming events. I'll introduce our key and featured speakers today, and then we'll get into our presentation, which will be on mastering Tableau parameters. And as always, we'll have a Q&A discussion. This is actually a little bit different format from last time. You'll probably notice that you're able to come off mute. So if you have questions throughout, we definitely encourage you. You can come off mute. You can ask a question. You can save those if you want to the Q&A, or please feel free to use the chat window if you have questions throughout. I'll be managing that, and if it's something that Jared can answer on the fly, we'll do so. But a little bit different format. So if you could stay off mute, during the session, but a little different here. We want to make this more interactive, right? So this is a webinar Zoom format. So just please observe customary webinar etiquette. I mentioned you could use the chat window. You can also come off mute and ask your questions. We'll obviously be holding a Q&A after the presentation. So any and all questions could be answered or followed up on. And then a link of the recording will be sent out following the today's session. And if you ever want to go back and look at all of the sessions, we do have those posted on our Zeo Matrix channel on YouTube. So just type in Zeo Matrix, you'll find all of these data-driven community sessions, as well as other content that we're putting out there on the web. Our last event is going to be in December. It's hard to believe we're almost into 2024. We're going to finish up the year with a session that is on advanced dashboarding. So we're going to talk to you about how you can level up your Tableau dashboards using actions, using dynamic zone visibility, using custom logos, and there'll be many more topics that we'll cover. So that'll be a really good session to join. That'll be on the 13th of December at noon Central. That'll be it for the year, and we'll see you in 2024. We'll have a whole list of new content coming out then. So we'll have one more session. All right, our featured speaker today is Jared Schulman. Jared's a lead consultant with Zeo Matrix. He has over 8 years. I think you're approaching 9 years, Jared, of Tableau experience.
Yeah, 2024 will be 9 years.
Yeah, I think we had on here that you love Tableau calculations. You also love parameters. So this will be a really fun session for you to cover. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stuart Tinsley, Director of Sales and Client Success. I used to work at Tableau in the past. I've been in the product about 9 years as well at this point. So excited to be your MC as always, and really excited for Jared's presentation today. Give me 1 second. I'm going to admit a few more people. All right. So our session today is mastering Tableau parameters. What we're going to cover today, Jared's going to go through a live demo of these topics. He's going to talk about how you can use Tableau to do metric swapping, dimension swapping, how you can do custom dates, how you can get a more robust and flexible ranking out of Tableau using parameters. He'll talk about dynamic thresholding. He'll talk about how to use and incorporate year-to-date and quarter-to-date and month-to-date. We actually talked about those in our previous session, those calculations, but how to actually take that to the next level with parameters. And then, Jared, I believe your final topic you'll cover is parameter actions using zoning, if that looks right. Right?
Yeah, we'll cover parameter actions using that with dynamic zone visibility. And I think that'll dovetail really well into next month's session as well. So a little teaser.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. And then we'll end with the Q&A session. Again, if you want to come off of mute and ask a question live, if you want to use the chat window, we'll monitor both. So we've made this more interactive, and please feel free if you have a question live. Jared, is that okay if we come off mute and they ask a question, or do you want to hold till the Q&A?
Yeah, just throw them out. We'll roll with it.
Okay.
That'd be fun.
All right. Fantastic. All right. Jared, I will kick it over to you for the live demo. I'm going to stop sharing and we'll get into it.
Awesome. All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am coming to you live here from the West Branch location of Austin Public Library. We help out Tableau with a state and local government training every 6 weeks, and today just happened to overlap with our data-driven community meetup. So please give me a little grace. I'm on one monitor instead of two with none of my external mouse and keyboard. So this is going to be an adventure for all of us. Like Stuart mentioned, we're going to go through a handful of different ways to use parameters today, metric and dimension swaps, parameters for custom dates, filtering by top N, and a few others. So we'll go ahead and dive in, and we'll start out with how to use parameters to swap between metrics. So if we start with a subcategory on our rows shelf, and we want to see sales, and we want to see profit, maybe we want to see the total quantity, we can start to drag these measures out. But if we wanted to be able to see one at a time and have the option to pick between them, we can create a parameter and a measure for that. So we can call this one metric. And when it comes to parameters, we can use a string and say that this is going to be sales and this is going to be profit. But if you're using enough parameters, I actually find it easier to use an integer and just create a list where 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to be sales in dollars, profit in dollars. It's my keyboard. We'll do quantity, which is just a number, and then profit ratio, which is a percentage. And so now, instead of having to remember exactly what string values we put in and, oh, is this capitalized? Does this have a space? We just have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's going to make our calculations easier once we get into that. So now that we have that parameter, we can create a calculated field off of it. And this is going to be our metric calc. We'll make this really simple with a case calculation. So we're going to say when metric is 1, then we have our sum of sales. When 2, then sum of profit. When 3, then sum of quantity. And the reason that we're using sums for all of that is because profit ratio is going to be an aggregated field. So this is going to be our sum of profit divided by sum of sales. And then we can end that. So that is all ready to go. If we bring this metric calc out, we get rid of these. Let's actually drag this up onto columns. So now when we show this metric parameter, we can choose between sales, profit, quantity, and profit ratio. And one of the newer features in Tableau Desktop now is you can actually, instead of having this axis say metric calc, we can also use the parameter to label the axis. So now when we change that from profit ratio to quantity to profit to sales, it's updating the title on our axis as well, which helps a lot when your end users are looking at charts and they want to know, what metric am I looking at? Well, this axis is sales or profit or quantity, and that'll update dynamically as you go, which is a really neat feature that wasn't available like 6 months ago. So that lets us swap different metrics. If we want to do the same thing with dimensions, I'm actually just going to duplicate this and delete that version. So this one is going to be dimension swaps. Let's go ahead and create a new parameter for dimensions. We'll do the same thing. I'm going to use a list of integers where 1, 2, and 3 are subcategory, state, province, and then manufacturer. And it'll be the same situation. We're going to create a calculated field off of that called dimension calc. And it's going to be another case statement. So when 1, then subcategory, when 2, then state province, and when 3, then manufacturer. We end that. And now if we bring out this dimension calc instead of our subcategory field, and we show that dimension parameter, we can switch between subcategory, state, province, and manufacturer. So automatically now we have, what is this, 12 different possible view combinations, 4 metrics and 3 dimensions that we can view all in one sheet. So where this could have been 12 different charts before, now we've made this a single sheet that we can put on a dashboard, and we can give our end users the ability to view this data by the dimensions and metrics that they want to see. So this is great for dimensions, it's great for measures. What if we want to give our end users some flexibility around dates as well? So if we have our order date, let's say that we want to see the week of order date and we want to see sales. So this is going to show us all of our data, and we could filter this if we wanted. We could even give our end users the option to filter on a relative date and see, okay, starting at this date, ending at this date, by days, weeks, months. But if we want to just give them total carte blanche, total creative control, let's use parameters to do that. So we're going to let them go ahead and pick their own start date. This is going to be a date parameter. And we're going to let them pick their own end date. And I'm just going to duplicate the start date and call this one end date. Now, once we do that, let's go ahead and show those. And we're going to create a calculated field. I'm really creative when it comes to names. So I'm going to call this one date filter. It took me a really long time to come up with that one, but I get a lot of mileage out of it. And the calculation for our date filter is going to say the order date is greater than or equal to our start date. And we can tell that this is the parameter because it's purple. And our order date is less than or equal to our end date. And that's going to give us this Boolean filter field that we can drop on our filter shelf and keep only true. And now if we put this on a dashboard, our end users can say, well, I want to see everything from 11/8/22 for the start date to 11/8/23 for the end date. And there's our last year. Or if they want to say, I want to see everything year to date, we can go from, or keep swapping these two. So this is going to be 11/8/23, and we'll call this 1/1/23. And now all of a sudden, we're seeing just this year. We can do the same thing if we go to 11/1. Well, this is by week. We can do this by day. And this is just the last 7 days, 11/1 to 11/8. So this gives your end users a lot of flexibility. It lets them pick any 2 dates, and they'll just see all of the data within those 2 dates using that date filter. And we'll circle back later and talk about adding a little bit more functionality to that as well. But just with that alone, they get a good amount of flexibility in how they can control what dates they're seeing in the view. So let's switch back over to talking about dimensions and how to show that dynamically in a view. If we bring out our dimension calc and we bring out, let's bring out our metric calc. We've got them both built. Why not use them? And let's show our metric parameter and our dimension parameter. And what if we just want to see like the top 10 states when we have this showing state? And we just want to see the top 10 subcategories when we have it shown by subcategory. We can do that with a top n filter, but if we want to have that dynamic, we can use a parameter for that as well. And so we're going to call this parameter top n. It's going to be an integer. We're going to allow all values, and we'll set the default value, this current value, to 10, just to start there. We can show this. And then if we bring our dimension calc over to filters and we use a top filter, we can filter top 10 by metric calc, or we can use the top n parameter to set that value. And if we do that, now we see our top 10. And if we change this to 5, well, now it's top 5. And we can do top 15. So any number that the end user inputs, they can see what that top value is. And this will also change if we switch to state province. Now we're seeing the top 15 by state province. We can do the same by manufacturer. We can do the same by quantity. So this adds another element of user interactivity and more flexibility to the view for your end users, where now they're not just controlling the metric and the dimension in the view, they're also controlling the view that they actually see. You know, we might not care about some of these bottom manufacturers that only have, 140 products sold. We might only care about these top 10 or so. And we can set the view to just show those. Now, if we're looking at,
I thought of something. You did a quick kind of Tableau trick that I wanted to make sure we called out. When you filtered the dimension calc, you used a keyboard trick to have it from rows and make a copy of it to put in filters. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay. So what is that? Explain that for the for people on the call.
Yeah. So if we take this off, there are two ways that we can put dimension calc on filters. We can come over here and find it, and this doesn't have a lot of fields in it, so it's not that hard to find. But if you have 200 different fields in your data source, it might be quicker to grab it from the rows shelf than to find it over here. And on a Mac, I'm holding down Command and then click and drag, and instead of pulling it off of the rows shelf, it's copying it. And so that way I don't have to come over here and find it. I can just copy it from the rows shelf over. I think on a PC it's Control. I'm trying to remember. Do you know offhand?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Someone on the call might know.
I can confirm it as I have a PC.
Perfect.
Control? Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've worked in Tableau directly on a PC, and even controlling a PC virtual machine from the Mac keyboard, it ends up still being Command. So that's perfect. Yeah, on a PC, you're going to hold Control and then click and drag. And if you're on a Mac, it's going to be the Command key. And instead of having to drag it out from the left, that will duplicate a field. We can do the same thing if we wanted to dual axis metric calc. We can Command click drag or Control click drag, and then have a second version of metric calc just by duplicating that.
That's super cool. We should maybe have a session on Tableau shortcut keys and tips and tricks on that stuff at some point.
Oh yeah,
gave me an idea. No, thanks for covering that. That's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good thing to stop and discuss for a second. So there's a lot of those little time-saving hacks. Perfect. So this is going to let us see our top n. But if we're working with tabular data, let's say that we have the dimension calc, and then we're looking at sales and profits. And let's go ahead and create a calculated field for that profit ratio that we used earlier. So this is going to be a sum of profits divided by a sum of sales. And because it's going to be a percentage, I'm going to multiply this by 100. And I'll explain why in a moment. That gives us our profit ratio. That is that one in the middle. Cool. And you just see, I'm going to take a detour here. I just want to see if I can. Yeah, it's going to make that higher than I want. All right, I want to throw a percentage on there, but it's going to be wonky formatting. So for now, we'll ignore that. We'll cover formatting on the next session. Now that we have the profit ratio, though, we can create a parameter if we want to see a highlight of, which I think this is manufacturers. So, whichever dimension calc we have, if we wanted to see a profit margin goal and highlight everyone who's above that, we can leave this as a float. Maybe we set this to 25% to start with. And this is, we'll show that. I'm actually just going to put a percentage in here so that the end user knows that's what units we're in. And I'm going to create a new calculated field for profit margin highlight. And in this case, I want the profit ratio to be greater than or equal to the profit margin goal percentage. So this is going to give me another true false field. If I drag this over to color, all of a sudden I'm seeing some oranges pop out. An orange is telling me that this is true, that the profit ratio is greater than the goal. And we can change this. So if we want to see, well, how many of these manufacturers are hitting above the goal if we increase the goal to 30%? Some of them drop off. If we want to see how many are making 50% profit or more, maybe none of them. So maybe we don't want to raise the goal to 50%. But 45%, there's a group up here of really high profit manufacturers where we're hitting over 45% profit on each of these. So the reason that I multiplied profit ratio by 100 was just to get it in this numerical format. The alternative is to divide this number by 100 and use this as a percentage. It just looks a little bit cleaner for the purposes of this demo to have it in whole numbers. So we figured we'd roll with that. But this is another really slick interactivity trick where you can start to see where's that cutoff if you set a goal. How many of the different manufacturers or whatever you're trying to measure are hitting above a particular goal.
Jared, I have a thought here, and also a question. This is a great sales example, right? Dealing with profit or dealing with any sort of sales. But not everyone's data is that, right? So, just encourage you to use your imagination on how you could set really any sort of target, any sort of goal, any sort of threshold where this could be applicable. This is obviously sales data, so this could be used in many different ways. Jared, question that I just thought of and had, like, where did you in the parameters set the default? So the end user would see, I'm guessing you'd edit the parameter and you would set it at the current value, or where would it be set to where the end user would see it as a default and they could make a selection?
Yeah, so when I create the parameter, I set this default value to 25. Okay. And that's just whatever current value it is. So as long as we're here in Tableau Desktop, we can edit this and it's going to continue to update that current value. And then whatever that value is when we publish the workbook to Tableau Server, Tableau Cloud, that's the value that will show up for the end users when they first go in and look at it.
Got it. So that's something you want to think about, I suppose, before you publish, is what's a good default value to start with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so you were talking about other use cases for this sort of thresholding. I mean, if you're working with survey data and you want to see a response rate across cohorts, maybe your response rate goal is 20%. And so you could set that response rate parameter at 20, and then see which of those cohorts of users or customers is above 20%. You do the same thing for retention rates, would be another big one. I came into consulting out of higher education, so student retention is big for higher ed. Or like season ticket holder retention, things like that. So there's a lot of different things that you could use this for getting some of that dynamic thresholding.
Right. It also seems like if you have 549 marks on the view, like bottom left corner shows us that. So this is that's a fair amount of data, and you might have even more of that. So this parameter and formula behind the scenes is great at calling attention to whatever threshold has been set with a lot of data in your view. Right.
Yeah. And we can combine all of these too, where if we wanted to again bring this dimension calc over and use that top n filter, we switch this to the top of top n, then we can start to, now granted this is the top n by metric, so yeah, there's going to be some changes based on what we're showing, but yeah, we can always combine these two, kind of like we did on some of the earlier views, and just give a ton of flexibility to the end users and what we're seeing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right on. All right. Well, I told you that we'd be coming back to the idea of working with dates, and we used a custom start and end date for this date view. And one of the things that we do a lot with clients is we'll build in some more extensive default functionality. And what that usually means is some version of year to date, quarter to date, and month to date, along with the custom functionality. Sometimes we'll do a rolling 90 days or a rolling 6 months as well. And we can do that with another parameter. So we might call this date selector. And we'll do the same thing again using a list of integers. And this one, let's say we have what, 4? So this might be our year to date, quarter to date, month to date, and then custom date. And in order to use this date selector for some of those presets, we can edit this date filter to say, based on the date selector, when it's 1, this is going to be year to date. So our order date is less than or equal to our end date, because we never really want to get past our end date. This will happen a lot. If you're looking at things like renewals, sometimes you might have some pre-scheduled, sometimes you have scheduled payments. And if your end date is going to be today, you probably want to have this stop at the end date. So you want to make sure the order date is less than the end date and it's in the same year. That's our year to date. Quarter to date, we're going to use a date trunk to the quarter level, order date, make sure that that equals the date trunk at the quarter level of our end date. And we still want to make sure that our order date is less than or equal to our end date. This is going to start looking really familiar. 3 is month to date. So we're going to say that the date trunk of the month level of order date is equal to the date trunk at the month level of end date. And we want to make sure that our order date is less than or equal to our end date. And that just leaves us with the custom, which we already had. So we want to say that order date is greater than or equal to start date and less than or equal to end date. We'll close out that calc. So once we update this, we're going to see our view shift. And now we've got all the way from January 1st to November 8th. And this is by day. We can switch this back to week, just clean it up a little bit. So that's our year-to-date view. If we look at quarter-to-date, it's going to go back to October 1st. Month-to-date is going to give us just that November 1st to November 8th view. And if we look at custom, then we can come back here and we can mess with our start and end dates again. So now, in addition to giving your end users the flexibility of the custom date, you also give them some frequently used presets, whether that's year to date, quarter to date. And you can always anchor these to today instead of that end date. So, here we're using end date instead of the today function. But if you want to have the flexibility of both, what you can do is you can create a field called today. And then in your end date, if we edit this and go to value when workbook opens, we can set it to automatically update when the end user comes into the workbook. The end date is always going to be today. And if we want to default the, let's say, we want to default that custom date to the beginning of the year, then we can date trunk to the year level today. And because date trunk is going to make it a date time, we'll go ahead and swap that to date, and that will match the data type of start date. And then we can default that to beginning of year. So now, whenever a user comes into this workbook, they have the year to date, they have the quarter to date, they have the month to date, and they have custom. And custom will always go from the beginning of the current year to today by default. That'll update every time someone opens up the workbook, and then they have the opportunity to change it to whatever they like from there. So just an absolute crazy amount of flexibility, between this and the metric and the dimension parameters. You're almost giving your end user their own data exploration window where they can come in and they can, explore the data by a number of different fields, any combination of dates that they want. It gives them just a ton of options for pulling insights out of that data, slicing in a bunch of different ways.
That is really cool, Jared. And just for folks on the call, if you join late, we're definitely recording the session. If you're like me, I'll go back, even if I was here from the beginning, and look at the recording just to get the logic, just to get the clicks down. So this is definitely recorded, but that's a really neat example right there. Full circle on the custom date back into month to date. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, just crazy amount of flexibility. Definitely feel free to review that. Let us know if you have questions about any of this afterwards. We're happy to circle back and go into more detail. And it looks like we have plenty of time to cover the last piece, which is great because the last thing that I want to talk about is a really cool functionality that a lot of Tableau users won't get into parameter actions and dashboard actions right off the bat. But if you can start leveraging these, it opens up some really cool opportunities for interactivity with your end users. For this parameter action, I'm going to start with a view that shows just sales by category. And it's going to be that simple. We're going to have 3 boxes, one for furniture, office supplies, and technology. Then I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to swap category for subcategory, bring that down to rows, and then I'm going to bring in my profit. Did I break it? I'm frozen. There we go. So we've got sales, we've got profits. We'll bring out profit ratio, and we'll bring out quantity as well. Just a more detailed view of the subcategories in the data. And if I want to make this really slick and interactive, this is going to be an incredibly ugly dashboard because I'm just going to whip a few things out real quick. But I can bring out my category view, and I'm going to make that large. I'm going to format this like it's a KPI. Maybe make that like 16. Give this centered. Great. Maybe I can edit the height on this to like 250. Awesome. So now I've got these three KPIs up top. And if I bring in my list of subcategories, go ahead and fit that to the entire view as well. So this is great. I can see my categories, I can see my subcategories, but it takes up the entire dashboard. And maybe I don't want to show all of this data right off the bat. Maybe I just want to have the user click on a particular category and then show the data for that category. So there's a few things that we're going to do to make that happen. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to create the parameter that drives this. This is going to be our category parameter. It's going to be a string. We're going to allow all values. And then I'm going to create a category filter. And this is going to say that our category equals our category parameter. And I'm going to apply that to my second sheet. So I'm going to exclude all false, which will only show me true. Come back over here. And last thing that I'm going to do, if I can get my zoom bar out of the way, is I'm going to create a Boolean field that I can use for dynamic zone visibility. And so this is going to be, we'll call it dynamic zone visibility category. And we want to say that the category parameter is not equal to none. Now our category isn't going to show none unless we set the value to none. And I'm going to come up into the dashboard actions menu and create a change parameter action that uses the parameter actions with zone sheet as a source. We're going to target the category parameter to change and use category as a source field, which means now when we click on this sheet, it's going to take whatever category we click on and set the category parameter to that value. And if we clear the selection, we want to set the value to none. This is all going to come together in a second here. It's a lot of setup, but once you get it going, it's pretty slick. If you haven't seen dynamic zone visibility before, I think it's come out within the past year or year and a half. And it's a better way of doing sheet swapping or show hide than having to use filters to like filter out all the data on a view and then hide the title. It's this control visibility using value box. And if you have a Boolean field in your view, you can go ahead and click on that field, and that's going to control whether or not we can see this sheet. And I'll bring out that parameter just so we can see how this is working. So our category parameter right now, we haven't changed the value, but the action that we set in dashboard actions will let us click on one of these. And now all of a sudden our category parameter is showing furniture. And if we unclick that, now the value is none. And it completely hides that sheet. So when the end user comes in, they'll see a very simple breakdown by category. And if they click on one of those categories, now we're seeing all of the office supplies subcategory. And if we click on technology, we see the technology subcategories. And if we unclick it, it hides it. And so this lets you store a lot of extra detail in your views without having to have it all on the dashboard all the time. You can use a parameter action to change the value of a parameter and then use that dynamic zone visibility on your other sheet to control what is in the view at any given time and let your end users click around and get that detailed data behind what they're seeing. I realized that was a lot of setup to get there. We created, multiple calculated fields plus the parameter and the parameter action. So feel free to go back to the recording and check that out again, or let us know if you have questions about it. But this is a really cool one. This dynamic zone visibility is a feature that we've loved using with clients ever since it came out.
Yeah, that's really cool. That is really cool.
Yeah, that's kind of like the big showstopper for parameters.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a lot
The
of other,
finale.
yeah, yeah. There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that we can do with parameter actions and dynamic zone visibility. We've got one client who we built a drill down map for, where if you click on a particular state, it drills down to a separate map using dynamic zone visibility.
Mm,
It has that state broken out by regions. And then if you click one of the regions, it drills down and breaks it out by submarkets. Then if you click a submarket, it goes down to a fourth sheet that breaks everything out by
right.
zip codes. And we use parameter actions to allow them to drill back up as well, like you would on a web page with like a breadcrumb link trail. So there's a ton of things
Yeah,
you can do with them.
that's really cool. That's really cool. Should we pivot to Q&A, Jared? Do you have any more examples you want to cover?
I think that was it on my notes. Yeah, happy to
Yeah.
take any questions. I know parameters are a funky feature. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different ways you can take them. So happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Yeah. I know one came in from Anthony. He asked, and Anthony, we might need to clarify this a little bit, but you asked, would you use a parameter to show just the results of the person who is looking at it?
Oh, okay, that's a really good question. Um, sort of, yes. So what you're asking about could be a good use case for row level security,
Mm,
um, which can be done on the data source side. But I believe we could also, I think we can also do that using parameters.
yeah,
So,
you probably could.
so yeah, if we allow all values for a user on a string value, um, value and workbook opens. So if we do that, so if we had a user table that had me in it, and let's see, so we have username, which should be me. Yeah, so that's going to show my email address. And then if we take, let's see if we can we plug that in here? Yeah. So we can use this parameter to default to the user's name when they log in. And that way, whoever opens it up, that's going to be their email address. And then we could say, this would be like a user filter. And we could say that our user field or our user parameter is equal to an email field in a second data source that we had. And we could apply that kind of row level security here in the workbook too. So that would be an option, absolutely. You can do the same thing if, if we had like a region table and I had certain regions assigned to me, then maybe we would use the region or the user email from regions. So there's some use cases.
I never thought, yeah, I never thought of it like that, because most of the time, Anthony, clients, if you want row level security, meaning the user signs in, they only see the data that they should see. We've typically seen like a client would have an entitlements table or a security table that gets joined back to your base like data model, and you do a similar formula, right, Jared?
Yeah, we would
And
do
you
that
can,
like here in the data source.
right,
And we would just say like username equals whatever that entitlements table is.
yeah,
And we might say
yes,
like,
there are a couple ways.
and then we could use like the Tableau Cloud user groups,
Mhm.
like is member of admin users.
Mhm.
And then we would be running that row level security on the data source side, which is going to be more performant. You're going to be bringing in less data that way versus doing it in the workbook.
Yeah, good question. That's really good. Anyone else have questions? Feel free to come off mute or use the chat window. Any other questions people have about parameters? No questions. I could think of a few as we're waiting. Jared, okay, so you've been in consulting a long time and worked in Tableau before consulting. You've met with a lot of clients that have requirements. So you've been in a situation where you get requirements from a customer or from a company you work for. When do you decide to use a parameter? Is there an example where you said, that based on that requirement, I'm going to use a parameter for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a big one right off the bat is if we have two data sources and we want to filter based on region in both data sources at once, instead of blending on region to do something like that, we can create a region parameter and then create a calculated field in both data sources that says the region equals the region parameter. And because the parameter exists at the workbook level and not at the data source level, we can use a single parameter to control filters in both data sources without having to blend them, which is a huge boost for performance.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's one of the biggest times that we'll use a parameter to sort of mask the fact that we have multiple data sources. There are some drawbacks. Yeah. It's only going to be single select instead of like we can't select central and east. But it provides a good solution for having to blend instead.
Yeah. I feel like the month to date, year to date, and custom comes up a lot, where like a user of the business has the let's call it the relative date option in Tableau just doesn't offer the flexibility they want, or they just want it more. They want it in year to date. They want it in quarter to date, month to date, but they also want that option to pick a time frame. So they're almost getting the best of both worlds, right? They're getting the relative date and the slider that Tableau offers, a range of dates in one with that example.
Yeah. And the nice thing about having this anchored by the end date instead of anchored by today is, that relative date filter on order date, this is always going to be anchored to today unless we set a specific anchor, but this never updates. Whereas we can look at year to date based off of a month ago. And so we can look at what that data looked like historically. We can look at quarter to date based on an end date of like 9/8. And now all of a sudden we're looking at the last quarter through 9/8. Whereas if we used the date filter on order date, and let's just look at it. If we swap this out, we do a relative date for like, last one quarter, well, this is always going to go through, and we have future data in here too. So this is going to show us everything. This isn't even giving us quarter to date. So, it's a lot more flexible. If we do look at quarter to date, well, now we can only look at this quarter. We can't go back and look at the previous quarter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, any other questions from the group? Thumbs up if you found this helpful today, if you're using parameters. These are great examples, Jared.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
I got
yeah, hopefully. Yeah, please. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah. On the example you're showing, you did a start date and end date instead of a date range. Why wouldn't you, or how would you have used a date range that would have been different?
So with the date filter, we can use a date range. So here's my order date filter. And here we can get like that date slider,
Mhm.
which is kind of similar to the start and end date. And that would be perfectly usable if you just wanted that functionality. You could do that instead of start and end date if all you wanted was the custom. But if you want to build in those presets for like year to date, quarter to date, rolling 6 months, or if you're trying to filter dates in multiple data sources, like we were talking about before, the parameters are going to be the way to go. And there's not a way, unless I'm wrong about this and they've updated it, there's not a way to create like a slider parameter that takes a start and end date by default. It's always going to be one value. So we create two of them, one for the start date and one for the end date.
Okay, so it's more of a aspect of Tableau. I don't want to say liability, but it's an aspect of Tableau that you need that fixed start and fixed end, as opposed to being able to recognize the start and end date within the date, within the range of dates.
Yeah, you can also set these date parameters to default to the start and end dates in the data. So we used today and start of year as our defaults. But if we wanted to, we could write a fixed calc to take the max order date for our end date. And then we could find our beginning of year and change that to the fixed minimum of order date in the data. And now when the users go and open up this workbook, these parameters for custom are going to start at the earliest and latest date in the data. So it will show everything by default on custom, and then they can limit it from there. So that's kind of one way to approximate this functionality and pair it with, this preset date filters. It's a really good question, though.
It seems like to master parameters, like in your experience, Jared, like knowing Tableau formulas, Tableau calculations has been really helpful. And then you're just, figuring out the functionality from there in a parameter.
Yeah, parameters at a high level are really just a way to insert some fixed value into a calculation. And then the question is, well, what fixed values do you want to put in and how do you want to use them? So that fixed value might be a particular date or date range. It might be, a dimension that you want to sort on or filter by, or a type of date that you want to look at. But parameters can be about as flexible as you want them to be. And it helps to have a good grasp of calcs so that you can think through, well, if I had a parameter that gave me this value, how would I use that in this calculation to create a Boolean filter and make this interactive, or to select a particular value from a field.
Yeah, I find it helpful too, like when you have a lot of calculations, like let's say you're using them for parameters. In that search bar in your data pane, Jared, you can search for a funnel icon right to the right will let you search for only the calculations in that workbook. That wasn't as I didn't notice that for a long time. And then the product, right? That could be helpful for troubleshooting. You can also you could put those formulas into folders, right? You could have just for more organization in a workbook, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, group by folder. Yeah. So that might help if you have lots of formulas. It cleans it up. It makes it a bit more organized in your Tableau workbook. So, yeah. Other tips.
I know a lot of people too who will name their parameters as like p dot dimension, particularly where you have like the same name. You can name a parameter p dot dimension and calculation c dot dimension. So a lot of folks will do that instead of dimension calc. they'll just do C dot. And when you start to do that, these will all join together alphabetically and make it easier to find your calcs too.
Yeah. Good tip. Well, cool. I know we're coming up on time. Any last questions from the group? Hopefully this was helpful. I definitely learned some things as always from Jared. But yeah, any last minute questions? Okay. If you join later, or just in general want the recording, that will be sent out. We'll also have it on our YouTube channel, Geometrics. I would look forward to the last session in December on advanced dashboarding. I think we'll touch on more zone visibility there too, Jared, right? And just ways you can really
the parameters will dovetail really well into that. We're gonna do some cool
right.
stuff.
Yeah. And some of the examples, just for folks that weren't able to join the calculation session, we go much deeper into the logic of year to date, month to date, and that type of syntax. So check those out. We'll see you in December, and reach out if you have any questions or feedback. We'd love to hear it, and we'll see you next month.